Hi, this is Lenny Cameron, and I am here with Laura Hankin to talk about A Special Place for Women. And I hear a rumor that this is going to be maybe made into a TV show. So I'm definitely going to put her on the spot about that one because not every day do I get to talk to an author whose book is going to the screen. So it's kind of exciting. So, Laura, thank you for joining me. And where are you joining me from?
Thank you for having me. I am joining you from Washington, D.C., nation's capital.
And I loved this book. This was so much fun. I loved how you kind of, from my perspective, bent genres. Like, yes, it's women's fiction. Yes, it's got an arc and a character who goes through this great kind of growth curve, but it's also got a few elements of magic. It's also got a little bit of suspense in there. Like, I love how you brought these different genres together. And so I'm excited to ask you about some of that. But why don't we start? If anyone hasn't seen this book, which honestly it's been everywhere, but it just came out in paperback, right? Very recently. So, if folks aren't familiar with A Special Place for Women, can you start by telling them a little bit about the book?
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that you said that about genre because it's so true. When people ask me what genre this book is, I'm always like, fantastic question. I have no idea how to answer that. But A Special Place for Women is about a journalist named Jillian who is in desperate need of a story to kickstart her career. And so she decides that she's going to try to infiltrate this secret club for women that's made up of the tastemaker girl bosses of New York City. You know, they're sort of rumored to be like the hot female Illuminati, basically. And so as she gets herself deeper and deeper into this club and is sucked into their glamorous lives, she uncovers some pretty wild secrets and has to decide if she wants to expose them or join them. Ooh.
And I love like how she faces that dilemma, right? Expose them versus join them. She starts with a really clear, like, I'm just going to go in and blow this thing apart and show what it is, right? And by halfway through the book, she's like, wait, there's some good in what's going on with this secret society. And maybe I shouldn't be so judgmental. And it's really interesting, her growth curve there.
Yeah, that is exactly what I wanted to convey with this book. Like so much about judgment. And we are so quick to judge one another and like really rush to put people in different boxes. And what would happen if we all took a little bit more time and tried to see people fully?
Oh, that's a great theme. Well, it makes me want to ask about your inspiration. Was that what you started with, or was it like an idea for a scene, or like what was the first like grain that led to this book?
So a while ago, when I was living in New York, I feel like there were a bunch of these types of places popping up, like these women-only co-working spaces or clubs. And there was one in particular that was quite big and quite popular and was all over Instagram. And it felt like all the cool girls in New York were joining it. And a friend of mine was a member, and she invited me to come join her for coffee there as a guest. And I was just so excited to go because I was like, oh, I could be one of the cool girls. And I walked in and just immediately felt so out of place. I was like, oh, I'm not one of the cool girls. I see. I like the anecdote that I always tell about it is that I was in this place where I was like running from day job to day job. My life felt like it was such a mess. And I was in the elevator with this woman who was talking to her friend, and she was saying how the biggest struggle in her life was that it was really hard dating a celebrity chef because he was never free for brunch. And I was just like, these are not my people, I guess. But it did make me think so much about belonging because I was like, oh, I bet that if they had seen me and embraced me with these open arms, I would have been all about it. Um, so I
Right.
wanted to just think more about a character who didn't really belong in a place like this, being forced to put herself in this place.
And did it change along the way? As as writers, we end up doing many revisions, and the first version very rarely looks like the end version. Is there anything, without giving spoilers, anything readers might be surprised to know is different than the first or original versions of this book?
Um, so I think one of the bigger things is there's a little bit of a love triangle in this book, although it's definitely not like a Team Jacob, Team what is his name
Oh,
in Twilight?
Twilight. Wait,
Edward.
yes.
Edward. Yeah, it's not like
Werewolf versus vampire. Yes.
yeah, Team Werewolf, Team Vampire. It's I think like pretty much everybody who reads this book is on one team. But in the first draft, the other guy was way more of a jerk, and I think my editor was like, "You need to give us a little something more here. Like maybe you don't need to make us truly torn about who she should choose, but at least let us see why she is drawn to this other guy. So that was a big change. But you mentioned the TV thing. I am adapting it for TV right now, and it's been this like fascinating opportunity to go back to your book, 2 years after you wrote it, and be like, what changes would you make now that it's been out in the world? And that's been
Oh,
pretty cool.
interesting. Well,
Hmm.
now I have a question about that because I didn't realize that you're involved or doing the adaptation. So very often when a book goes to screen, it changes dramatically. And part of that is the people working on the screen version are not the person who wrote the book. And I'm thinking of like Kathleen Barber's Truth Be Told. There's quite
Mm.
dramatic differences. In fact, the point of view, it's great both as a book and an Apple TV show, but like the point of view is different in the TV show. Like the characters are the same, but they flipped the point of view. And they
Oh,
made some big
fascinating.
changes in how some of the characters looked and their ethnicity and all kinds of things, which all of which I would say improved on it for TV. But like, are you able to like, do you want to, or are you able to move so dramatically away from the book, or are you keeping closer to it? Like, it seems like that would be harder as the author.
Yeah. So the good thing is that, a previous book of mine, uh, never announced this, but like has been also optioned and somebody else adapted it, but was really wonderful about letting me into the process on that and, letting me give feedback. And she, over the course of adapting it, realized that it had to change pretty dramatically for TV, like to the point of making a different person the main character of the whole thing. And so I think I got a really good educational experience in that, where I was like, wow, you just got to let it go and like realize it, just do what's best for the medium that it's going to be in. Um, and so I think now when I think about A Special Place for Women on TV, I'm like, oh, sure, make a change. If this is going to work better, make that change. That's fine. Even before starting to write the script, I like already had ideas of some things that I wanted to change. All that being said, though, I think it's not changing dramatically, or like the heart of it isn't changing. Um, in it sounds like the way that maybe Truth Be Told did. Uh, yeah, so maybe I'm hewing slightly closer to the book.
Well, it's interesting because that one changed the point of view, but I would say the heart of the book didn't change, to your point,
Mm.
right? Because stories can be told many different ways. In fact, I'm reworking my current novel, my second one, as a dual timeline, and it's like 80% of the book is going to be different, but the heart of the book is the same, which is hard to explain to someone that I'm going to rewrite 80% of the words in the book, but the actual heart of what I'm saying is not changing. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's wild. It's like this particular kind of magic that you can do that
Yes.
and still have.
So when you're
Yeah.
magicking up what do you call it? A screen adaptation, like a screenplay? What's it referred to? A script, like a
This one, since it's for television, and I wrote the script for the first episode, it's the pilot script.
Okay. So
Yeah.
when you're doing that, what's the biggest difference for those who are a little farther apart from this world? Like, how does it differ in how you approach it?
Yeah, so you're thinking so much more about visuals and dialogue as opposed to, what's going on inside characters' heads, because you can't spend a lot of time describing all of that stuff. You probably don't want to do the thing where it's just like constant voiceover,
Right.
narrating somebody's thoughts. So, yeah, I think you want to just make everything a lot more active. Um,
Mhm.
and yeah, focus on the dialogue, which honestly, dialogue and plot are my favorite parts of writing novels anyway. So kind of works out.
That's fascinating. It must actually be an interesting, almost like an interesting exercise to try and come up with a visual for each thing that you can no longer show as internal dialogue. Like that would be an interesting writing exercise, even for novels, right? On show versus tell, to think about how could I do this instead of internal monologue.
Oh, yeah, exactly. And the other thing too is thinking about like if you have a scene that's just taking place between two characters like at a table, is there a more interesting place that they could be doing this,
Right.
So,
Right. I'm having fun
mm.
with my next book with that because it's got some adventure. She's an adventure travel Instagrammer. So I'm like, okay,
Oh,
could they do this while they're skydiving? Could they do this while they're running towards the edge of a cliff? I'm like, all kinds of fun opportunities, to your
all
point.
right. I'm expecting to read this book and every scene will be them jumping off a cliff.
So now that this is out there and it's been so well received, a special place for women. I mean, I wanted to have you on the podcast because I pick the best of women's fiction, and I've seen so many people raving about this book, and I knew that it was among the best out there even before I read it. So, like, has there been anything as readers are reading it? and giving you feedback? Anything that's been surprising or that has warmed your heart? Just anything in terms of reader feedback?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I've had a few people reach out and be like, this is my favorite book ever, which I think when people say that, I die of joy. But I think the other interesting thing is just like how wildly different people's opinions can be. Because, this book, I think a lot of people love it. And some people are like, this book is way too weird for me. And this twist, like, took me way too much by surprise. And I don't like genre bending, which is fine. Like, some people don't like genre bending. That's fine.
That's
But like, I remember in the early days of getting tagged in reviews on Instagram, I got tagged in reviews back to back. The first one was like Jillian, the main character. I've never related to a person more. Like, I love her so much. And then the next review literally was like, Jillian's a terrible person and I hated her, but I was interested in her story. So I
oh,
think
that's
that's just
funny.
something that really surprises you. Like, I think any author is just the wide variety of opinions that people will have.
Isn't that wild? Well, I
Yeah.
love to read like one endorsement of a book or a review from another author. So let me quickly read one on this, which I think captures it lovely. And it's from Emily Henry,
Oh.
whose latest book Lovers is also blowing up right now. And she also wrote People Might Know People We Meet on Vacation. And I loved what Emily says. She says, one of the smartest, sharpest, and funniest books I've read in years. A novel that will keep you on the knife's edge between dread and delight, turning pages late into the night. Some books are meant to be devoured. This one does the devouring. How cool is
Yeah.
that?
I remember when I got that blurb just being like, is Emily Henry a goddess? It's so
Right?
nice. Yeah.
But it's so true. I read through this book and like, I mean, I'm a fast reader, but I think this was like twice as fast as my normal books because I was just like flipping the pages, wanting to see what happens. So it's a
Oh,
great book.
thank you.
So let's see. Let's talk about maybe advice for other writers. You've come very far, very fast with your author career. I mean, many authors would be like, "I want to be like Laura and already be
Yeah.
writing a screen adaptation of how many books do you have? Is this number two, number three,
This is number 3, but it's funny you should say
number
that.
three?
Like, when I was younger, I published a book that did not do well at all. Like, I don't know, not that many people read it, and I think it was very clearly a first book. It was sort of right on the edge between young adult, and it just didn't fully know what it wanted to be. Um, and then after that, I wrote a whole other book that didn't get published, and so it's funny that in some ways, yes, I have had a lot of success very fast, and in other ways, I feel like I was working on this for 7 years before I got
I
a book deal
love how
for
you
having
said
you
that.
wrote it.
Yeah, and it's a common theme on the podcast. So many writers share this that like there's no such thing as an overnight success, right? Like nobody
Yeah,
suddenly pops onto the scene, writes their book in a year, and it becomes a New York Times bestseller. Like, well, I've not met that person yet. I've met the
right.
people who worked like 20 years on their debut and had an overnight success of their debut, right? Like that's what it looks
Yeah.
like. So yeah, I love that you brought that up.
Yeah, somebody, I think Mari Andrews, that's her name. She's like a illustrator, and she has this great illustration of an iceberg, and it's like you see the tip of the iceberg,
Yes.
and that's the overnight success. And then everything under the water is like all the work and all the time that you took to get there.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So, other than stick with it, don't give up, keep writing, put your butt in your chair every day, what do you advise other writers? Or not every day? That's a big debate, actually. I do not write every single day. So,
I don't either. Well, and I think it's helpful because it could become something that you feel like you have to do all the time. And I feel like I try to only do it on weekdays unless I am running up against a deadline or something like that. Let's see. Other advice. I mean, going along with the whole overnight success thing that we were just talking about, I think giving yourself the permission to be bad for a while is important too. Like, first drafts are always going to be bad unless you don't feel that way, and then I'm very envious of you. But like,
oh
I've
gosh,
written so
no,
many
I'm
books.
about to rewrite my book and it's on draft 5. So, God.
Yeah. I mean, this book that I have coming out next year that I'm really excited about and like that I love the idea of. I've written many books at this point. I wrote the first draft of that and I had to rewrite like 20,000 words of it for the second draft. Like it it's still really hard to write a first draft. that is not bad. And you just have to, I think, acknowledge that and push through it. Um,
Right.
yeah, because
Are
I
you
think a
a
lot of
plotter
people,
or a pantser or somewhere in the middle?
I'm becoming more of a plotter as I get more experienced with this. I think it is helpful to have at least some plot in place, but I don't like beat by beat, scene by scene plot it all out. What about you?
My first one I feel like was more of a pantsing book, and then I tried
Mm,
to become more of a plotter, but I've also learned about myself that if I plot it out to the nth degree, I don't even want to write it. Like if I get to the point that I know every single thing that's going to happen in every scene, I'm not excited anymore. And so it's just
yeah.
interesting how everybody's creative brain works, and I've just learned that about myself. And so I think I'm always going to be somewhere in the middle. Like even as much as I want to plot, I think the reality is I'll never be 100% plotter.
Yeah. I think living in the middle is great.
So what's the biggest thing you've had to learn, or writing wise, what do you think is the biggest thing you've learned? Like a lot of writers, they learn their own process, right? And there's no one right process, to your point, and it changes with every book. And I've heard some writers tell me every book is different. Like some writers who are on book 20 have said like, oh, by the way, there is no one process even for me. And so like what's changed for you and how you approach it, and what have you learned about your own process?
Yeah. I mean, I think becoming more of a plotter over time has definitely changed. I've also learned that it's really helpful for me to just have a word count that I try to hit every day that I'm writing. If I aim for 1,000 words a day, it just gives me some structure. And I think that's something that you can definitely lack in the writing life unless you impose it upon yourself. Um, and so, yeah, the more structure that I can give myself, the better. And times when like the words really aren't coming, sometimes I'll even break it down. My friend Chloe has this method where she'll like break it down 250 words at a time, like to get to the 1,000 per day. And she'll put it on a post-it note. She'll write like 250, 250. And each time she reaches 250 words, she like crosses it off on the post-it note, and it makes her feel a sense of accomplishment. And I stole
Nice.
that from her.
Well, I have a question. I want to learn something from you. So, like
Hmm.
when you're writing your first draft or even your second draft, it makes sense to do like words per day. But then once you get into revising, like for me, I have a monster spreadsheet and I kind of track how many scenes and what percent of the way I am through the book. Just same thing. I'm trying to keep myself motivated. Otherwise, it feels like
Yeah.
I'm just waiting in it forever. How do you manage your progress when you're revising? Do you just count chapters, but then you're going back and forth? Like, how do you approach that?
Yeah, I think maybe revising isn't quite as hard for me as putting words on the page in the same way. So I don't need to motivate myself quite as much, which is funny. Like, I don't know if I ever thought when I was younger that I'd be like, oh, revising is the easier part. Because I think when I started out, I was like, no, everything I do has to be perfect. How could it be better? I'm so attached to it. And now I'm like, give me notes, rip it apart. um, yeah. So I think I wish I could do a spreadsheet like you, actually. Maybe I need to learn from you on this one. But
Well,
for
I
me, I
think
just have
most
like a
writers would
word doc.
cringe, like, "Oh my goodness, a spreadsheet." But it just motivates me because I can see, I'm 10%, I'm 12%, I'm 14% of the way through, and so it just helps me see that I am making progress, even when it doesn't feel like it.
Yeah, that's smart. I just write down everything I need to do in a Word doc, and then I'll like, bold it when I finish or something like that.
That's cool. That's another way to do it.
Yeah.
So, talking of learning from things and books, I would love to know if you've read any books that you admire or appreciate or have enjoyed recently.
Yeah. So I'm in the middle right now of Marrying the Ketchups by Jennifer Close, and it's really good. It's about this family, like this extended family and the restaurant that they run in a Chicago suburb. And she's just so good at character study and writing these like flawed, full, complicated people who are really just kind of struggling to be humans in the world. And she's so funny. I'm really enjoying that one, Marrying the Ketchups. And then another book that I liked recently was At Least You Have Your Health by Maddie Sinha, which is about a gynecologist who gets fired. I believe she gets fired from her job at a, practice, and she ends up taking a job as the gynecologist for this like wellness app startup company. And so it's her getting sucked into this world of like wealthy women who want on demand, on call medicine. And sort of trying to figure out where her own line is between like wellness and medicine and what she's willing to do for these people. It's great. It's a real page turner and very
Ooh,
funny
that
as well.
sounds interesting. I actually have a friend who does that, who is like a private wellness doctor for a network of patients, and it's been fascinating hearing her stories of how
Oh,
that goes, and it's very different from being like a GP and a general practitioner in a normal practice or regular practice. Yeah,
yeah. Yeah, and I think, what the author does so well is show that, like, there are some really good things about this world because a lot of doctors, in general practice, like, don't have the time to really spend
right.
with each patient that they want, but also the way in which she's sort of selling her soul in other ways to just appease because you gotta
Right.
keep the patients happy, you know?
Right,
Yeah.
right. Oh, two great recommendations, and I'll put those on the show note in the show notes on the website so people can find the links to those books and your books as well.
Thank
And
you.
question for you, where do you hang out the most on social media? Oh, of course, I forgot to ask you the most important thing. How the heck are you so funny on TikTok? You're
Oh my god.
hysterical on TikTok.
Thank you. I think it helps that I have a performing background. I was a real theater nerd growing up. Um, but yeah, I don't know. I go through real phases on TikTok. Sometimes I'm like, I am a queen of TikTok. I understand this platform perfectly. And then I'll make, 7 videos that nobody watches and are terrible. So, yeah.
Well, I'll also put the link to your TikTok because I love your TikTok. You are probably my favorite person to follow on TikTok right now. Like, I love your stuff.
That is so nice. Thank you. Yeah, TikTok and Instagram is my other big one that I do a lot.
Okay, TikTok and Instagram. We'll put the links. And before we wrap up, is there anything that I haven't asked you that you love to talk about or want to bring up?
Oh my gosh, anything that I love to talk about. Well, I love to talk about early 2000s nostalgia, and that's what I'm writing my next book on, which will be out next year. So it's called The Daydreams. You can add it to Goodreads now. Yeah,
Tell us
keep
tell
an
us a
eye out
tiny
for
bit
that.
about it. What's out there? What can we know about it?
Yeah, so it's sort of like Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid, but set in the Britney Justin era of the early 2000s. So it's about the stars of a TV show, a musical TV show, sort of like High School Musical. Um, and at the height of their fame, they just combust spectacularly on live TV. And now it's 13 years later. They've all gone in very different directions and they come back together for a reunion special. Because, we were all so obsessed and continue to be obsessed with like getting these casts back together to come.
Yeah, like the Friends reunion that just happened, right? Like,
Yeah, exactly. But this one, there are lots of old betrayals and secrets and unfinished
fun.
business, and it's a lot of fun.
Oh, that sounds like so much fun. Okay, I'm gonna go put it on my Goodreads shelf and also work out how I get my hands on an arc of it as well.
Oh,
So
yeah. Yeah. We'll get you one.
awesome. Well, Laura, thank you for joining me today. This has been so fun, so much fun, and congrats on the TV and the paperback coming out. I'd encourage folks to go check it out. It is a great read. And
Thank
I
you.
appreciate you making time with everything else that's going on in your life right now.
Oh, this was so fun. I was really looking forward to it, and you over-delivered. So, thank you.
Thanks so much.